US Vice President Kamala Harris has announced a trip to Africa later this month. Now, she's set to visit Ghana, Tanzania and Zambia on her first trip to the continent since becoming vice president. Now, that's on the heels of US State Secretary Antony Blinken's visit to the region, where he announced that the United States would be allocating $150 million to combat security issues in the Sahel region. Well, to discuss the current state of affairs in Africa, we welcome to the studio Dr. Fred Meembe, the president of the Zambian Socialist Party. Dr. Fred, thanks very much for joining us today here at RT. Now, obviously, Kamala Harris is going to Africa very soon, and as I just mentioned, Antony Blinken has just been there. And Sergei Lavrov has had numerous tours of Africa recently. Do we see Africa, do we see the United States and Russia vying for influence at Africa at the moment? What would you say to that?
Maybe before I answer that question, let me start with the ICC indictment of President Putin.
OK.
I think it's mischievous, it's malicious, it has no legal basis, it's all politics and very cheap politics. The people who are supposed to have been indicted by the ICC are President Bush, Tony Blair, and others, including President Clinton. They killed Muammar Gaddafi. They killed many Libyans with no good reason. They have killed children in Syria. They have killed so many people in Iraq. They have killed so many people in Afghanistan. They have killed our leaders. They killed Patrice Lumumba. They have killed so many Africans, so many other people in the world. None of them has been indicted by the ICC.
So we're sticking with the ICC then we'll move on to Africa a little bit shortly. It's certainly very interesting timing, and it definitely comes on the eve of President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow. It's obviously the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq as well. What do you make of the timing of the ICC's arrest warrant for President Vladimir Putin?
They don't want the war to end. They are benefiting from this war. It's their war. It's a proxy war that they are fighting. They don't want the war to end. President Xi Jinping's trip here is part of the effort to end this conflict. There's need to end this conflict. It's unnecessary. It's a conflict they started. It's a conflict they're fueling. It's a conflict they want to sustain for their own benefit, not even for the benefit of the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian people wanted to live in peace. They need peace. But the peace of the Ukrainian people cannot be guaranteed without guaranteeing also the security of the Russian people. Mm-hmm. Security for Russia is necessary, just as much as there's need for security for Europe, there's security for America. Every nation on this planet should feel secure if we have to achieve peace in the world.
Do you think there'll be any concrete agreements reached between Xi Jinping and Putin during that visit in terms of peace in Ukraine?
I think President Putin has been positive. From 2008 through to 2014, if the Americans and their partners had been listening, they had been wanting peace, there would be no conflict in Ukraine. This is their conflict. They wanted it. Mm. They have sustained it. President Putin means well. President Xi Jinping means well. They would like to see this conflict end. But it can't end if the security concerns of Russia are not guaranteed, are not listened to. Russia didn't just walk into Ukraine. They had been pleading from 2008 to have a peaceful region. You can't be pushing NATO through into Moscow.
Although, ironically, NATO will be on Russia's border now when Finland becomes part of NATO, which was recently ratified by the Turkish leader.
It is part of the escalation of conflicts. It's part of the making of Russia insecure. The USA would not accept Russia or China to have military facilities in Canada, to have military facilities in Mexico. They would not accept that. They never accepted the missiles placed in Cuba in 1962. Mm-hmm. You saw what crisis arose out of that. But today they are setting up bases everywhere in the world, including in my own country, Zambia. Mm-hmm. They are setting up a military office, which they are calling a military office, but we know it's a military facility. What has Zambia got to do with the USA security?
But do you see both Russia and America and China vying for influence in Africa as a whole now? Obviously, there's some high-profile visits of Kamala Harris, Antony Blinken, and Sergei Lavrov has done numerous tours of Africa as well.
Russia, China have been dealing with Africa for a long time. They have been on the side of Africa in Africa's liberation struggles. They have been on the side of Africa in Africa's effort to build these nations. They have been with us. The Americans have been on the side of those who oppressed Africa, those who brutalized Africa, those who dehumanized Africans. They have been on it. They supported the apartheid regime in South Africa. It's not a secret. They even participated in the arresting of Nelson Mandela and sending him to prison for 27 years. They were arming the racist minority regime, white minority regime in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia then. They were supporting their bombings of villages, of facilities in Zambia. They supported the colonial authorities in Angola, in Mozambique, in Cape Verde, in Guinea-Bissau. They participated in killing of our leaders, national liberation heroes. What can they tell us today? What do they want? How many people has Russia killed, even under the Soviet Union in Africa? How many Africans have the Chinese killed in Africa? Who has led coups in Africa, military coups? Has Russia carried out any military coup in Africa? Has China carried out any military coup in Africa?
How would you say Russia's relations with Africa have changed since the start of the war in Ukraine last year?
Russia was lying low with Africa. The relationship was not so much pronounced. And Russia has never been advertising its relations with Africa. Even the support to the African peoples in their national liberation struggles was not for publicity, was not for politics. Russia had no companies operating in Africa at that time when they were supporting our national liberation. Not a single mine, not a single business was owned by Russia on the African soil. You can say the same about China. But can we say the same about the United States? Can we say the same about Britain or and other European countries, France? They have exploited that for centuries. Russia even refused to take part in the scramble of Africa. The Tsar had a representative at the 1884 Berlin Conference in which Africa was carved into Bantustans. But Russia never took a territory in 1884, 1885.
Now, just to play devil's advocate, Dr. Fred, there have been some critics of China that say that it's luring many countries in Africa into a debt trap by providing these big loans with very sort of quite easy conditions without strict enough ways of paying it back. What would you say to those critics of China?
Let's look at the countries that are said to be highly indebted. Let's take Zambia. Only 30% of Zambia's debt, external debt, belongs to China and Chinese enterprises. 70% of it belongs to the Western companies and institutions. 70%. Only 10%, about 10% of Ghana's foreign debt is with China, if not less. Actually, it's less. The great majority of it, 80%, 90%, belongs to Western institutions. So who is causing a debt trap for Africa, for African countries? If you go to Zambia today, you can see clearly where the debt with the Chinese lies. You see the rail in Africa, you see rail lines in Africa, you see hospitals, you see schools, you see hydropower stations, you see agriculture dams, and so on. And even they are not even talking about free things that have been done. If you go to Zambia today, the second biggest hospital in the country is a gift from China. The biggest conference hall built in Lusaka is a gift from China. The biggest soccer stadium in Zambia today, the Heroes Stadium, is a gift from China. The Chinese don't talk about these things. You will not find a hospital, a big hospital, built by Americans or the British. You will not find a big road built by them, you will not find anything of value or that is tangible. You will not find an airport. When Kamala Harris lands in Lusaka, she'll be landing at an airport built by the Chinese. She'll be traveling on the road to a hotel on a road built by the Chinese.
Does Russia have a big footprint in Zambia at the moment? How do you characterise the relations between those two countries, and how do you see their prospects for development in the future?
We need more cooperation with Russia.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see
After
that?
the national liberation, Russia pulled back. It just kept on supporting. We have so many students, African students, studying in Russia today, a continuation from the 60s. We have a university here in Moscow that was built in solidarity with the African peoples, in honor of Patrice Lumumba. Can you find that anywhere in the West? The support to Africa had continued, but the problem is Russia did not go into heavy economic cooperation with Africa in terms of investments and so forth. You don't find many Russian enterprises in Africa. You don't find many.
Do you see that changing in the future?
We want that to change. No country on this planet can solve all its problems by itself. We all need each other. Even the richest country, the United States, needs the cooperation of others. We need cooperation with Russia.
Now, obviously, there are countless problems throughout the world and in Africa, and Anthony Blinken promised $150 million to the Sahel region to help battle Islamist insurgents there. What do you make of that? Will it help, or should the international community be tackling the problem in a different way?
Even the $150 million they have pledged is too little. Look at the amounts of money they are pouring into Ukraine. Look at the billions. The problem in the Sahel has been created by them. We didn't have Islamist insurgency before the toppling and the killing of Muammar Gaddafi. They started importing extremists into Libya to fight Gaddafi. The problem has continued. It's the same situation in Afghanistan. They created that problem.
This vacuum that was created?
Yes, they created the problem.
Does Africa have, because there's an international task force as well that Africa has created, do you think that Africa will be able to provide its own solution to this without any external assistance?
Yes, we need to lead the processes. All the processes on the African continent, we need to lead them. But we cannot solve our problems on our own. We can't solve these problems on our own.
Well, I think that's I think we shall leave the interview there. We've covered quite a wide range of geopolitics there. That's President of the Zambia Socialist Party, Dr. Fred Meembe. Thank you very much for your time today here on our team.
Thank you.
Thank you.